Welcome to another episode of Before You Kill Yourself with your host, Leo Flowers. I am Leo Flowers. Joining me today is Dr. Cecily Havert. She has an incredible smile on her face right now. Um, and she's a physician at Northern Virginia Family Practice and Associates. She specializes in women's health with an emphasis on LGBTQ community, helping them out, help them nurture their emotional and mental health needs. And she speaks publicly about anxiety, menopause, women's cardiovascular health, and COVID-19. But today's emphasis is going to be about how parents can support children's mental health. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Habib.
Well, thank you so much. That was a great introduction. It's nice to
Yeah.
be here.
I hope so. You wrote it. So,
Yeah, I'm like, does that all still hold true? Oh, yeah. So yeah, that's all still me.
Okay. Are you're still married? You still have two sons and a zoo at the house?
I do. I have a zoo at the house. I'm not sure. I have 3 cats now. I think my bio might only say 2, but now we have 3. COVID, you just got to keep adopting those animals.
Yeah. Can you even decorate your house with so much going on, or are they just like tearing things as you put it up?
No, they've completely taken over. I have given up 100%. But it's kind of nice not to have to worry about that. I'm like, oh, I just got a great excuse. I just have cats. They'll just, they're going to tear up the furniture. We don't have to buy anything nice.
I love it. And you're out there in Alexandria, Virginia, small
Correct,
town. Yeah. So what are, when I say small, like 160,000?
Yeah.
What are parents coming to you with? Like what are the mental health anxieties that kids are presenting with, and how do parents support their kids?
Yeah, it's even before COVID hit, the incidence of depression, anxiety, challenges in school, behavior issues, it seems to have been, was ticking up a little bit just in general. We can maybe, talk about theorize why that might have been. But let me tell you, when COVID hit and, schools shut down and ability for kids to connect and be with one another, in fear, trauma, when all of that ticked up, my goodness, there was a lot of reaching out about, kids that were struggling, that were really, really suffering. So, a lot of what we saw was depression, kids not wanting to, either sleeping too much, not wanting to get out of bed, and also virtual school. I mean, that's tough. And so a lot of times kids didn't want to participate in that. And that could, doesn't necessarily mean you're depressed. It's just, it's a tough way to learn. But just, but also, families themselves were under a lot of stress. Parents were very stressed out. There was more anxiety. So there was kind of a trickle down effect, but that's kind of what we've been seeing. And, as a primary care doctor, we're a lot of times we're the entry point for mental health care. Not everybody can jump in and start seeing a therapist or even realize that that's what they need. But if parents will notice that there's something that's just not right about their child, and then we're the kind of the first line of defense, and then we have to kind of pick apart the situation and see what we can find out.
That's an interesting note, because I never really thought of the primary care physician or doctor being the entryway into helping a family member with mental health. Because in all the years that I've been to see a doctor, not that I go there regularly. I mean, now I do because I'm 45. And
That's right.
The body is just like, look, we got to go see somebody about this.
Right.
But I don't know that I've had one recommend me for like mental health services. How does that work? So do you reach out to other therapists, or how do they go from you to the next step?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times when people will come to me, I mean, whether it's kids or adults, a lot of times, they don't even recognize that what they're experiencing is anxiety or depression, right? I mean, so sometimes just getting to an understanding that what they are experiencing actually is related to mental health can be a challenge. And so that's, they'll come to me with palpitations, heart racing, I can't sleep, these issues, and they think it's a physical problem. So part of what brings people in to see me is thinking that there's a physical problem, and my job is to figure out, is it physical or is it mental? So that's kind of phase one. But sometimes people will, come in and they say, I'm just, they recognize that what they're feeling is anxiety, what they're feeling is depression. And, we'll talk about that a little bit. There's different screening tests that we do to sort of gauge at what level that they're really being affected, and then talk about different options. But your question about being, tied in with different therapists, I do a lot of mental health care. So, and over the years, I have an army of of therapists that I use, that I try to direct people to. Let me tell you, COVID has made it hard because these practices are filled to the brim. So there's wait lists and everything. But yeah, I try to act as as primary care doctors, I consider myself somewhat of a project manager. So trying to get people to the right places and help them out and support them, and finding the right people that can help them if I'm not able to do it. So that's what I sort of see my job as.
I love that. And you're so right when, the number of people who present with what they think are physical problems, which really are more mental or emotional issues. Like, I remember my first panic attack. And
classic, right?
Oh my God. I thought I was gonna, like, tunnel vision, sweaty palms, heart racing, couldn't breathe. And I remember I had it in a therapy session because I had my master's in psychology. And I remember just like having to talk myself down as the client is talking. But even before that, as a kid, I just had so much social anxiety. I think like almost every day before I went to school, I'd be like sweating and nervous right before I walked into the building. And but I recognized it was like a nervousness about walking into the building versus it being a health issue.
Is it? Well, you recognize that, but I think it's so interesting, and part of sort of understanding ourselves and the effect that mental health has on our physical health is sort of recognizing, wow, look at what being nervous does to my body. I feel sweaty. My heart rate goes up, and these are all part of fight or flight. Right. That's our body's getting ready to react. It's getting ready to protect itself. And so, but recognizing that these bodily reactions are actually normal. And, a lot of times what I try to do is to validate them with people also. So what you're feeling is real. I understand. They say it's not in my head. I said, I know it's not in your head. These feelings are real, but helping them understand where they come from and what we might have to do to make them better.
So what can someone do to make it better? Like what are you suggesting, or what have you discovered from your patients or clients that you were like, wow, that's a good tactic or tool to share with other people?
Yeah, I think recognizing what it is and validating your feelings, I think, is number one. And then just showing yourself compassion. And, allowing yourself to have these feelings and just to be kind to yourself instead of saying, oh, gosh, I wish I didn't feel this way. And I'm so stupid for feeling this way. I'm just, I feel so bad because I can't control this. It's just giving yourself compassion and say, it's okay. Be kind to yourself. I think that's one of the first things that you can do. But other things you can do, a lot of times, if we really need to just sort of shut off that fight or flight, that spiral, is one thing that you can do are even we've heard of meditation, right? And so sometimes that you get into a nice quiet space and do some deep breathing and everything, but there's something called micro meditations that I think can help people a lot. And it's just a little bit of rubbing your fingers together, for example, and just sitting and stopping and rubbing your fingers and just thinking about the sensation of that happening for about 30 seconds. And a lot of times what that will do, it takes you out of that fight or flight place and you go to a different part of your brain and you're sort of thinking about the feeling, the sensation. Let's think about that. And you'll find that, in a minute or two, what you were feeling, that stress, that anxiety, that fight or flight has reduced. So micro meditation, it's something you can do. It's easy. You don't have to set yourself up in a room and, turn on meditation music or anything like that. It's very, very easy and practical. So I think being kind to yourself, and then just, maybe little episodes of micro meditation can help.
I love that idea of a micro meditation because I think a lot of people are turned off from meditation
Mm-hmm.
because they think of, I don't want to sit for an hour,
Exactly.
or I don't have, even 10 minutes, or just sitting for 2 minutes with myself is too much. So that, just kind of rubbing your fingers together. You know what that
Mm-hmm.
reminds me of?
What?
Eastern medicine, when they have those
Mm.
balls that they uh, um, uh, twirl between their fingers. Twirl is not the right word, but um, like those two Zen balls
Yeah.
that they're kind of
The Zen balls. And
rotating.
yeah, exactly. It's the same concept. I mean, it really, what it does is it allows us just to pay attention to something else that's happening and getting out of our own heads. And it's, it can be relaxing, and it allows us to reset. And, we're constantly on the go, and it's in just having these tricks just calm us down in the moment can be so helpful. And, like you were saying, just, with the, when parents come in with their kids, what do you do to help them out? I mean, these are some of the first things that I talk about. It's just, let's figure out a way that in the moment when we just feel like we can't, be in our own body, what can we do in that moment? That's step one, right? Let's get through that minute.
So I want
That's
to
one of the
drill.
first places will start.
I want to drill down on that a little bit more, Dr.
Mm.
Havert, because, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, so many of us are on the go, and the struggle for a lot of parents is that they're working two jobs,
Yeah.
and there's very little parent-child interaction. Oftentimes, I know even for me, like I was home before mom got home, so I had to cook dinner. I had to tuck myself in. My mom left for work in the morning before I left for school. There's a lot of alone time. And so I love this idea of how to relax on the go. I had a cart ride the other night. It was 90 minutes, and music, podcast, none of it filled the void. And I was just like, let me see if I can notice any yellow cars. Like, how many
Ah,
yellow cars will I see before I get home? So are
ah.
there, what are other ways that people can soothe on the go?
Oh, well, that's a great one. I love that when you just trying to look, at, and also that helps you sort of connect a little bit more with your surroundings, right? Takes you out of your own head. So I think anything that you can do, whether it's, playing a little game with yourself, the yellow cars, or a game that I like to play with my kids, or, the, the alphabet game when you're in a long car ride, and you look on the, on the side of the truck for A, so you kind of go through the whole alphabet, and it's sort of, that's a fun little game that you can actually play with one another. It's sort of interactive, but
Wait, what's the alphabet game? Can you
you don't
explain that
know
a
the
little?
alphabet game?
I
Oh, it's
don't
so much
know.
fun. Oh
What
gosh.
is
Well,
it?
you don't need to do it with someone else. You can just, whether in the car alone. So basically you start with the letter A, and you have to look around, and sometimes on the side of the either like a license plate or a sign on the road or a truck with like ABC towing, and you say A is that, and then you go on to B. So you're just looking for all the letters of the alphabet in that order, but you're just kind of focusing, you're looking in your
Oh, you know
surroundings.
what? I played that game at a bar.
Well, okay, you can
I
play it anywhere. You don't have to do it in a car. But it's a lot of times you're really, kind of taking your focus away from, maybe someplace you didn't want to be, and you're just refocusing, you're resetting,
I
and it's
love that.
fun.
Yeah, we played it at a bar where because we
Mm-hmm.
were at this fancy bar where they had a bunch of wines on display, and we're seeing if we could find every letter of the alphabet in the names of the bottles on the we I think there were like two letters we didn't get. But
I would think there'd be a couple that would be tricky
yeah.
or not so common in bottles of wine. But yeah, it's just, it's a fun game. So so on the go, that's a tricky thing, to try to, give yourself time. And also along those lines, just the kind of the overscheduled nature that we're all part of. One thing I noticed that was interesting about COVID, I know we're kind of going a different direction, was that the overscheduled part of everybody's lives kind of stopped a little bit, right? So that was something that was very interesting. And I was trying to point out to patients, let's notice how we feel about this. And so a lot of people actually felt a little bit calmer.
You bring up such a great point because when I'm in San Diego, you're in Alexandria, Virginia, which is very close to DC. And
Yeah, it's
those are
essentially outside, right outside. Yeah.
and those are two very bustling cities,
Ugh.
people on a go. And just the sound that you made right there, just it's like even to sit still. But in a lot of European countries and historically, we as a people have taken siestas. We've
Mm-hmm.
taken midday breaks for a couple hours. And I know that, part of your emphasis on the work that you do is cardiovascular health. And I was looking at research showing that once we got rid of the siesta, that if you don't know what a siesta is, basically a 2 hour break in the middle of the day,
Right in the
which
middle of the day.
right in the
Yeah.
middle of the day from like
It's
1
perfect.
to 3. In some countries, it's
Yeah.
like 11 to 4. Some places still shut down. I think like in Greece,
Mm-hmm.
some parts. Or you could just go home, relax, and you come back to work and you work till like 8 or 10 or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. Um, and they said that heart attacks increased, I might be exaggerating this number, by 60% once they eliminated the siestas.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to highlight what you're talking about being over scheduled, can you
Yeah.
talk about that? Because it's also about removing things from our life that are causing the anxiety and the depression.
It's true. It's a lot of it is prioritizing what brings us joy in our life, and recognizing that just having 20 things on the docket isn't necessarily, being the most busy person in the room doesn't necessarily bring us joy, right? If anything, it can bring us a lot of stress. And and some people maybe can handle that better than others, but I think in general, you hear people complaining about it all the time. Parents who have to bring their kids, they don't, they've got this practice, and this club, and everything, and they just, there's I think they do it because they like to think that they're being connected with these different clubs, but are we really connecting with one another while we're doing it? Is the big question. Are we connecting with our kids enough, or are we just keeping them so busy that we just can't connect, or we don't connect? So I think it's a tough thing, and I think during COVID we noticed that we didn't have all those things, and there was a little bit more of a calm. We were mourning the loss of not being able to go to games, and especially for kids, all the different activities, but at the same time it was a little bit, we were also able to relax a little bit. And mentioning the siestas, it's just other countries, I think, recognize that we don't have to push ourselves to the brink of exhaustion in order to be successful, in order to be happy. I'm not exactly sure, how the work ethic and everything sort of came to be what it is here in this country, but it's definitely, it's taking a toll on all of us. And I'm just seeing, things are kind of ramping up again now that COVID is, we've got methods to, to combat it, and, kind of get around it. And, it's starting to ramp up a little bit again. And I would just hope that people would sort of recognize, what, the changes, and what, just this over scheduled state that we're in, and maybe make some decisions about this is something that's really going to bring them joy.
I love that. Yeah, get Marie Kondo with it. Like
Mm.
look at your schedule and
Yeah,
be
yeah,
like,
why not?
does this bring me joy from one
Does
to
this bring
two?
me joy? No, I am going to throw this. I'm going to throw this in the bin.
You work a lot also with women who are who are transitioning, that the middle of their life, the second half of their life. I know you
Oh,
contribute a lot to the second half podcast.
Mm.
And I would imagine for parents, especially mothers, women who are going through menopause, so many hormonal changes, estrogen changes, birth control comes into play. And then you're also still raising your kid and trying to tune
Mm.
in to what they're experiencing. What are things that women or mothers can need to be aware of at that state, to because they're overworked,
Hmm.
they're overscheduled, and then they're what's going, can you talk to us a little bit about what's going on hormonally? What are they experiencing physiologically?
Well, that's tough. I mean, I do a lot of women's health care, and I would have to say that probably one of the most challenging times for women is actually the stage of the perimenopause. I would say sort of late 40s, early 50s, and yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different things that contribute to it. The hormones definitely can do it. I mean, you're not feeling great physically. There's more fatigue. Sleep is not great, and that's a lot of that's related to the hormones. But also, you sort of look at where we are just in life in general, right? I mean, we're kind of if we've got a career, it's we maybe 20 years in, so we're experts sort of where we are with our career. Our kids are also, we spent a lot of time raising them, and they're kind of at this stage, it depends on when people have their children, but they could also just be at this adolescent stage, which is tough when the kids are starting to transition, right, from being kids to being young adults. I mean, that's a challenging state. So that can throw us off a little bit. But with all of this going on, the irritability, anxiety, and depression really start to become a problem that we see coming up a little bit more, even during this time. And like I said, there's lots of reasons for it, but I think something that I think you've talked about in your podcast before is destigmatizing mental health and giving people a voice to talk about how they're feeling, and also give them opportunities to find answers in allowing them to feel better. So there's a lot going on at this stage. I could talk the whole podcast about
Uh,
dealing with women at this stage.
so yeah, I want to drill down on one more question. And I love that
Yeah.
you highlighted, definitely destigmatizing and talking about how you're feeling and what you're experiencing, because so much is going on externally in the world, in your life, in your career, and then internally, hormonally.
Mm.
What are because I don't know this, but I imagine uh, mid 40s, 50s, that's also then when women are getting off their birth control pill, correct? Because they don't need it, or are they still continuing to take it?
Potentially. I mean, it depends on why. There's lots of reasons why women take birth control pills. I mean, it is obviously a contraceptive. I mean, some women also use it for controlling really heavy periods, and so. But when we get closer to menopause, we don't actually, need the birth control pill anymore. Usually the bleeding patterns will start to cease. We're not as fertile. I won't say we weren't completely fertile, but the fertility factor is much lower. So you don't need the contraception part of it. But yeah, so we usually do recommend to women around the age of 50. I usually say if they've been on their birth control pills, all through their 30s and 40s, and said, okay, well, we're at 50 now. I think now's the time when we can see what's going to happen when we're off of this. Is the period going to come back? What's going to happen here? But yeah, then there would be a sudden drop, right, in hormones, because birth control pills are those hormones. So there's I guess we're a chemical imbalance. We're kind of taking away the safety of the birth control. So yeah. I mean, sometimes we actually have to start women back on forms of hormones around this time, depending on how they feel when we take them off of them.
Yeah, and the reason why I was bringing it up, because this is a suicide prevention podcast,
Mm.
and I think that I was just diagnosed with asthma, and I was taking this pill before bed for my asthma, and started realizing like I was having sleep issues. I was having increased suicidal
Interesting. Yeah.
ideations. I was crying all the time for no reason. And then
Okay.
and I forgot that my doctor was like, yeah, there could be some side effects. And
Hmm.
I think that a lot of times when we go on or come off of a medication, we forget that there might be some side effects that could be contributing to our anxiety or to our depression. And I imagine there's a lot of women who are on birth control pills who are probably taking other medications. In general, are there things to consider when we're taking a woman off of birth control due to menopause? Can she just be taken off of it immediately, or can she be slowly weaned off? Or what in general do you see as the our best practices for coming off the birth control pill?
I think that in general, I mean, with women, usually when they're on the birth control pill, most women will do 3 weeks on, 1 week off of hormones, right? So they've sort of had this period of time of being off of it. So usually, for birth control pills, I don't usually recommend require that women go on any weaning. What they'll probably, I don't think that would necessarily help kind of ease your way into it. Once you come off of it, you'll start to notice how you're feeling. And interestingly enough, I mean, sometimes women on birth control pills will actually say that it makes their emotions worse. Right. And so some people will, so it's interesting how hormones, and we don't completely, we probably don't even have tip of the iceberg of understanding completely how this affects us. But some women can't even take birth control pills because they feel so dysregulated on them. And some people have to take them because they have horrible PMS, like right before their period, they'll feel absolutely terrible. And the birth control pill helps that. But yeah, I don't necessarily, feel that you have to wean off of it. That being said, being on hormones or being on birth control pills, suddenly, not having those hormones there, and especially if you're in menopause and you don't really have a whole lot of natural, hormones there, in addition, yeah, you could feel pretty bad. I mean, the things to look out for would be, poor sleep, irritability, and, just headaches. Joint aches and pains are common, actually, interestingly enough, when women are going through menopause and the estrogen level goes down. So just looking out for just, those feelings. And then if they experience that, then we'll talk about, well, is it worthwhile to go back on hormones, or are there other medications? Are there other methods that we can use to try to help you feel better?
I love that. So it sounds like if the estrogen levels are decreasing, then are we talking estrogen supplements? In some cases, I read people use SSRIs. What are your thoughts
Mm-hmm.
on either?
Yeah, it depends on what the problem is, right? I mean, so if the problem is, oh, I'm anxious, I'm irritable, I can't sleep, then a lot of times let's talk about SSRIs. They can definitely help. I've had it help a lot of women going through this transitional time. Hot flashes, I don't think I've mentioned that. That's probably one of the most common, physical effects that women will have during menopause. And, that's sometimes if the hot flashes are so bad, that's when we would maybe consider estrogen, maybe a little bit of estrogen, not necessarily birth control pills, but maybe. But we could use estrogen in different forms, just the hormone replacement pill. We now have hormone replacement patches that I actually like, as a little transdermal patch that you can put on. I feel that's a little bit safer in certain circumstances. But a lot of it just depends on, what's going on. What symptoms do we need to treat?
I love that. And you have two kids. You have a petting zoo going on at the house. We talked earlier about connecting. You
Yeah.
talk. It's one thing to keep our kids busy, but it's another thing for us to make sure that it's not replacing us, our
Mm.
relationship as a parent. What are some practices that you have with your two sons to connect? And I ask that because I have a friend, and her daughter's going off to college, and
Mm.
so when she was picking her daughter up from school every day, that was their time to connect. That's what she
Yeah.
called her tea time. Do you have a tea
Yeah.
time with your sons, or is
I
it?
do. Well, yeah, no, I love that question. And a lot of times it's, we do have to find that balance. I mean, it's important for kids to have outlets where they can, express themselves and meet with their friends and have those connections outside the home, right? It's not that we want them to be 100 like connected with us all the time. I mean, it's important for kids as they grow to become independent, to explore, find out about themselves, so that's important. But it's just a balance of, maybe, making sure they got the balance between that and also, time at home. But so what I like to think about with quality time is not necessarily quantity in terms of number, but for amount of time, but the actual time that you do spend with one another should be high quality. It should be time when you don't have devices around. I know that's hard, but it can be hard for me. It's especially hard for my kids, but just trying to put those aside and just having times where you talk. One of my kids loves to take a walk. And so that's a great way. And it doesn't, we can just walk around the block a couple of times. One of our cats of the zoo likes to follow us. So we have a nice time with that. So that's a great way to connect with one of my sons. And it's just 20 minutes, but you feel good after doing that. And then another one of my sons, I've got two. The other one I drive to school in the morning. So that's our time. And he enjoys introducing me to his music. And so, it's pretty cool, but it's great to know what your kids are interested in and ask them questions about it. I think that's a great way to connect, even if, the music that he listens to isn't necessarily what I would listen to, but the time in the car, we listen to his music. I ask him questions about it. I ask him about the artists, and it just makes them feel like you care, that you really do.
Absolutely, asking questions instead of judging, like, "Why are you listening to this
Mm,
crap?" Or,
yeah.
"Are what is this? How dare you?"
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
is a beautiful way. It's kinda like meeting them where they're at,
Hmm.
and so that they, like you said, so they know that you care about them as a person and not just trying to push your agenda of how you want them to be.
Exactly. Exactly. I think and sometimes, yeah, we kind of get lost in that when we're just pushing our kids to do this and driving them here. And, oh, did you do your homework? And, oh, we have practice, we have this, we have that. And sometimes you just have to say, well, what kind of music do you like? Like, what have you tried any new food these days? Like, you just sort of taking a step back and just connecting with them on a really, really simple level it's refreshing.
Now, you have a degree in microbiology and bacteriology from, I can't even say this, bacteriology.
Yeah,
For,
bacteriology. It's essentially, I don't know why. Yeah, I went to Madison, University of Wisconsin, Madison, and you couldn't major in biology there. You had to major in something, something else.
very, very
Immunology,
specific.
bacteriology, zoology, but I chose bacteriology, I guess. Yeah.
And I bring that up because what's causing a lot of anxiety and depression is, should, for parents, should they get their kids the vaccine
Mm.
shots? Should they get the booster? As a mom, as a wife, with two kids, and you're working around patients, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I tell you, I'm a strong believer in science. Went to the undergrad and obviously med school, and so I trust the science. And so I'm a supporter of the vaccines. Both my kids. I've got a 12-year-old and a 14 and a half year old, and they're both vaccinated. And it's not to say that you just don't think or don't care or anything about that. I mean, obviously you do, you think about the pros and the cons and everything, but I mean, I really do feel that the science is where it needs to be in terms of the safety of these vaccines. So I'm a supporter of it. And, it just showing what the vaccines have allowed us as a society and as a global community to do is just, start to get back that feeling of control. I recently contributed actually to an article that was looking at some research regarding mental health associated with getting the vaccine, and showing that people who get the vaccine, the effect on their mental health was, it's so many positive benefits. So, there's the physical benefits, but also just looking at what this pandemic has done to us as a society, and just the amount of stress and anxiety and depression, and how the vaccine has helped given us some control over a situation. So is it perfect? No, but it's something that I feel that, that we need to do. And, but everybody has, makes up their own mind. I don't force the issue on anybody. Obviously people decide for themselves, but as a doctor, I can make recommendations, and it's something I do recommend.
Yeah, as soon as I got my second shot, I felt like Superman. I was like, "Oh, bump into me. Let's get some hugs.
Yeah,
I can
exactly.
stop
Right.
bullets." Yeah, absolutely. So I never thought about that mental health part about it. Definitely reduced my anxiety. I mean, I still wear a mask. I still wash my hands,
Mm-hmm.
and I take those necessary precautions. But I just feel like I feel like a little safer. I know nothing's 100%, but I'm like, at least I'm doing, you know, I'm doing my best to prevent it, or catching it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say, what you're talking about is getting control over this, right? I mean, even before we had the vaccines, I remember talking to patients who just were feeling just so frightened. And I said, well, what can you do to get control? All that we can do, we can't control what our neighbor does. We can't control what, the person, in the next country or the next state over is doing. But what we can do is we can control what we do. And so wearing a mask and washing your hands, these are very powerful things that you can do. And then the vaccine just added another level of control to helping us, kind of get through and feel less anxious about everything.
And I love that you brought up the word control, because I want to emphasize that this is not a go get vaccinated
Mm-hmm.
podcast. I'm not saying that. What I do want to emphasize is, when we're experiencing anxiety, especially anxiety, um, it behooves us to look at what are the areas in my life that are within my control, instead of
Mm-hmm.
focusing on everything's out of control, everything's falling apart, the world's collapsing, there's global warming, everything's on fire. It's like, all right, what's in my control? I can get a
Exactly.
shot, I can exercise, I
Mm-hmm.
can, whatever those, I can call a friend. Like, what's in your realm of actual control, and then letting everything else go,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. If
That
you can do
that's
it,
a
it's
part of
easier.
it.
Absolutely easier said than done. But I think that's where, good therapy is helpful too, because, therapy can help people sort of understand the power that we actually do have within ourselves. And also, again, back to that compassion, back to that self-kindness, that self-compassion. Your feelings are your feelings. You're we validate the feelings that you have, but you can also change those feelings. They are temporary, and getting control over different aspects of our life can really, really be helpful.
I know that you work with the LGBTQ community,
Mm-hmm.
and I can imagine that, on top of the anxiety of COVID, of the economy, if a parent who has a child who uh, may be struggling with coming out, or dealing with their sexuality at that young age, what have you found in terms of uh, parents advice to parents for connecting with their child who might be uh, experiencing that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, a big, again, getting down to connecting, right? I think that where a lot of the struggle in the LGBTQ community comes from, especially when they're in the process of kind of that self-discovery of coming out, just being able to talk about their feelings is really, really important, but also being with both peers. I think it's important to also have peers to be able to talk to about what they're feeling, and then having a parent be supportive. of their feelings as well. I mean, there are studies that show that that suicide rates are much higher in the LGBTQ community if they don't have a supportive parent, and this is especially high in the trans community. So it's, just having a supportive parent who's open, willing to, let their child, discuss how they're feeling, and just, trying to withhold judgment. The kids are, trying to figure everything out, and they just need your love. And that's, as a parent, that's what you're there for. You're there to keep them safe and to show them love. And that's probably one of the most basic and important things that you can contribute to any child, but especially a child who is, struggling with coming out and LGBTQ issues.
Connect, support, validate. Last two
Yep.
questions,
Yeah.
Dr.
Yeah.
Havert. Are any books or resources that you recommend to parents who have kids who might be struggling with, anxiety or depression?
There are so many great websites. I don't have any particular books. I mean, who reads books anymore these days, right? It's all we all listen to podcasts, and we do audiobooks maybe, but I don't have any particular sites. I still like to go back to the CDC and NIH. I think that there's a lot of great information. The National Institutes of Mental Health have so many great resources and just information in general about mental health. And I think that's, can be very, very helpful. And I think just finding, and also on the AAFP, the American Academy of Family Physicians. I'm a family physician. So their website also has a lot of information about mental health. You do have to be, a good consumer. The internet is full of information, right? And so being able to find the information that's correct and accurate is of the utmost importance. So I usually tell people to use .gov or .edu or .org as their, the basis of finding out information.
Thank you so much. And then last question, because I always imagine there's one person listening in who may be on the precipice of wanting to end their life. Before you kill yourself, what would you say to them, Dr. Havert?
I would say stop, think. Also, again, bringing back the kindness and compassion. And I think just validating, like understanding why they're feeling the way that they're feeling in this moment. But that, again, this is temporary and things can change. And to give them a little bit of hope that it certainly can.
I love it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much, listeners, for tuning in. You can go to thrivewithleo.com for one-on-one coaching. Remember, this podcast is not a substitute for you going to get help, whether it's a physician, a psychiatrist, psychologist. Call an enemy, call a friend, call anybody. Express yourself, connect, reach out on Facebook. There are a million phone numbers and emails listed in each and every single one of the show notes. I'll have links to the CDC, the MIH, and the AAFP also in this show note. And let's get to tomorrow together. Thank you so much, Dr. Havert.
Thank you so much for having me.